Believe it or not, it's been over 20 years since Jaguar introduced this, the X350 Generation XJ, its flagship saloon. But despite its fabulous range of V6 and V8 engines and its groundbreaking aluminium architecture, there were many who were critical of the somewhat staid and retro-inspired styling, none more so than the by then Jaguar design director Ian Callum. Come 2007, you get this, the X358 Facelift. We thought we'd pitch the two together, understand what the differences are, and really see whether the X358 really is any better.
But first, our friends at Lancaster Insurance are running monthly giveaways. You can win all sorts, from experience days to tools, restaurant vouchers and tech. So click the link below at the end of the video to enter their latest competition.
So we've covered the X350 extensively in the past, and you can go back and see many videos on this precise example, our very early X350 4.2. But the history of the 350 is fascinating. It was late getting to market because of issues with the body in white, but it was finally unveiled at the Paris Motor Show in 2002, an absolutely shiny, polished aluminium example, therefore to highlight its advanced aluminium construction. And it caused quite a stir. It was significantly bigger than the 308 that it replaced, almost 10 centimeters taller than the Series 1 XJ6, stiffer, and yet it was much lighter. It made advances in all the right places. It was initially available with 3-litre V6, 3.5 V8, and 4.2 V8 petrols, the latter 4.2 being available in a supercharged XJR and Super V8 model. So it entered the market largely to good acclaim. It was said to outride and outhandle its competitors. Air suspension all round got a bit of stick for its low speed ride, but overall its blend of dynamics and yet comfort and refinement were well lauded, more than a match for its German competitors, that's for sure. What then followed was a series of subtle range tweaks, really, sort of minor additions to the model range from Sport and Sport Plus, SE. Come 2005 model year, the petrol engines were joined by the 2.7 V6 turbo diesel, and the year after, half of all XJ sales in the UK were diesels, and the year after that it was about 75%. However, the trouble is, by the time the X350 went on sale in 2003, Jaguar's design director Ian Callum had been in post for about 3 years. He had real reservations about the retro styling that the 350 had followed, very much as the S-Type and the X-Type that had gone before it had. He wanted something with a bit more purpose. The problem is the advanced aluminium architecture meant that re-stamping body panels was really hard to do. It had been really expensive to re-engineer the exterior surfaces. Ian Callum was playing around with lots of different design concepts. So you'll get the R Coupe and the RD6 concepts had the C-Type inspired oval grille, and one of the common themes for both of those was the side grille. Ian Callum was a real fan of what you would call the side graphic. It needed to look like it was moving even when it was parked up. You need to be able to clearly identify what make of car it was. So he was very keen on having a Jaguar script down the side of the car. He was a real big fan of clean lines. You didn't want any fussy swage lines or rubbing strip. We then saw the Concept 8 XJ prototype at the New York show in 2004, and that was an attempt to push the design language of the 350, a more radical interior, dramatic big alloys that really filled the arches, and crucially those side grills that you first saw in that R Coupe. They served no engineering function whatsoever, but they looked good. They gave it some depth to the front wings and crucially gave that Jaguar identifier on the side. While Callum and many others were not fans of the retro styling, it appears to have aged rather well. The egg crate grille certainly has its detractors. It looks a bit cheap and plasticky, which probably explains why many people either go for the chrome affair and just go all out with that classic look, or they replace it with the XJR mesh grille. But there's no doubt that despite the slightly higher roofline, you get great interior packaging, and you get a decent sized boot, lovely comfortable chairs. The interior is similarly retro styled like the exterior, but again, it all works very well. It's quite classy with these big deep panels of wood, piano black finish for the center console, which looks a lot better with the touch screen that was there, and it's been really well put together as well. Build quality is exceptional. This model's done 151,000 miles now. Apart from sort of routine maintenance, it really hasn't wanted for much. The 4.2 normally aspirated V8 packs around 300 horsepower, and it's a glorious engine, so refined and so smooth, really easy to drive. When you want to get a move on, Instigate kick down and off you go. It's brilliant. Apparently the air suspension was chosen due to the complex ratio of the unsprung weight versus occupants. Air suspension was thought to be the best way of tackling that weight distribution in the car. It did mean that the low speed ride wasn't as accomplished as the 308 that it replaced, but it's not to say it's bad by any means. That aluminium architecture did have its slight issues with corrosion in key areas. There's only a handful of weld points in the whole body, which is why it's so advanced, And it's those areas which have really had problems on very early cars, and that was tackled under warranty. So really, it's actually quite an elegant design. It was quite clear though that Callum was getting itchy feet, desperately wanted to update the design language. He really wanted to tidy up the X350. Come the back end of 2007, the X350 finally became the X358. So here we are in the facelifted X358, introduced at the back end of 2007 for the 2008 model year. The changes were actually quite subtle, but credit to Callum and his design team, they were utterly effective. There are a few real tweaky bits. The growler badge and the Jaguar script itself had changed. Most of the changes beyond that were all the exterior. As we said earlier, the idea of fundamentally changing the aluminium panels was pretty much ruled out. A lot of the changes are quite subtle, and you'll notice that the grille's got a much more pronounced border and then deep mesh chrome, and that extends into the bumper itself. A combination of that gives it a much more aggressive looking face, and those side gills have now made their appearance on here on the 358. You get chunkier door mirrors, very reminiscent of a Volvo of the same period, it's worth saying. A new chunky rear bumper, slightly tweaked tail lights, and you'll notice that the finisher at the back is now full width. Gave it a bit more elegance to the proportions. You could really sort of see the width, the straight edges. There's also a whole new range of alloy wheels, which again gave it a slightly edgier, sportier look. And I think the effect was really quite accomplished. I think I prefer the styling of the 358 over the X350. Perhaps you could let us know in the comments which one you prefer. The model we've got here is a 2.7 turbo diesel. Well, as we said, the diesel represented 75% of the sales. It's not hard to see why. While it's got 96 fewer horses under the bonnet compared to the 4.2 V8 we're comparing it with today, it actually has marginally more torque, and there's certainly no questioning the refinement. So while Sir William Lyons would have probably been turning in his grave at the mere suggestion, I think it's safe to say technology had moved on come 2005, and what we have here now is a much sportier, more in keeping diesel power plant. It's got a lovely V6 roar to it. It's very smooth, very refined. It pulls cleanly every inch of the Jaguar, in my opinion. Not a lot of difference to the way they drive either. The real big difference between the two, by the time you get to the facelift car, Jaguar had switched brake suppliers from Brembo to TDVi. So standard models actually got bigger brake discs all round. Can't say I noticed the difference in braking performance between the two, having said that. That ride, particularly on a sort of open road like this, is very corsetting, works really well. The steering is well weighted. You'll notice in here this has got the deep burr walnut, but the 358 also had other interior choices. An aluminium finish that was probably more reminiscent of early E-types. You'd have seen that on Sport and XJR models. So while the changes are subtle, what you've got to understand the 358 is it's more Callum and his design team putting their stamp on this flagship saloon, a signal of intent, if you will, as to what was to come. Come 2010, so just 2.5 years later, we then had the much more curvaceous and more radically styled X350, and that was definitely where Callum wanted to go. It certainly had its detractors. It was perhaps too radical for some. I personally am a big fan of it. Both cars are superb, but they are definitely very different periods of time for Jaguar. The X350 and the X358 are very much a segue from a traditional era of the past into very much the forward-thinking era. So I suppose we should consider the 358 as the perfect compromise. A traditional exterior with just hints of modernity that tip their hat to that groundbreaking aluminium architecture, those wonderful engines. I think the 350 and the 358, with its radical underpinnings, really makes that bold statement, and to that end, you really can't overlook them.
This video is proudly sponsored by Lancaster Insurance. Give them a call on 01480 400 889 for an insurance quote on your classic car. And don't forget to click the link below to enter their latest competition.